You're a mystery to me, man. You're just a mystery. I like that. All right. So, we are starting a new sermon series. We are in the season of Advent. We are in the season of preparing for Christmas, for preparing for the reading and rereading of the Christmas story. We are titling this sermon series, Simply Christmas. Simply Christmas. And what we're going to do is go through the story of the Christmas story found in the book of Luke, specifically the second chapter. And we are going to do a little old school. I rarely do this, guys. I rarely do this. We are going to break it down verse by verse. So that's why you have in front of you 3 verses, because there's a lot to break down. There's a lot going on in those verses. And I'll give some supplementary verses as we go along. But this is what you'll see for most of the Sundays up till Christmas is 3 or 4 verses of the classic story of Christmas told by the author Luke, and we'll just see what's behind all these things, because we've heard it so many times, the idea of Christmas or the story of Christmas, heard a lot. What's actually heading behind that? So where I want to start today, though, is I think ironic in some ways, but I want to start with food. So I feel like some of you have seen food in the last few days, maybe more of it than you ever wanted to see in your life. But I have been reading about food. Food fascinates me because, first of all, it goes inside of me, and I think I'm eating healthy, and then nothing happens. And as we work our way to New Year's, I've been thinking about my New Year's resolution, and my New Year's resolution always is to lose a pant size. And this is a complete failure for the last decade of Pastor John's existence. So I've just been reading up on food, trying to prepare for that. I don't know why I read about food on Thanksgiving week, but there you go. I'm glutton for punishment, I guess. So, but I was reading about food, and especially new food. The idea of new food is basically any food that didn't really exist before 50 years ago. Kind of the concept of new food. And this is a concept that food, I always thought all food was pretty much good for you on some level. Everybody knows that fruits and veggies are good for you, but surely that Oreo cookie has something good for me inside of it. It is food, for goodness sake, right? Surely that Pop-Tart is good on some level. It has calcium or something, some good protein of some sort, But this is an interesting quote that I just read. As a rule, this is from Melissa Hartwig and her husband Dallas and Melissa Hartwig in their book, It Starts With Food. As a rule, we think that foods are good for your body should also not mess with your mind. And this is what I started to learn about new foods, is that they mess with your mind, and they do it on purpose. The food scientists, there is food scientists. I obviously don't watch the Food Network enough to know that there are food scientists out there. It messes with your brain, this new food. So here's what they do. They take something like, say like chicken or something like that, and somehow they are able to extract all the nutrients denseness of chicken, but make it highly, it can last for a long time. It has a high shelf life. You can sit in your refrigerator for a year and you can still eat it, kind of thing, right? But because they extracted all the nutrients out of it, they had to put flavor back into it. So what they do, and I like this little thing, is what happens to your brain when you eat junk food? It's not just junk food, it's new food. I want to define this new food. It's basically what they do is they put back on it salt or sugar, or they leave a certain amount of the fats. Because our brains, this is fascinating to me. I get all giddy when I understand something sciencey. Our brains, when we taste something salty or sugary or fatty, instantly understands that this is a nutrient-based or nutrient-rich food. Because if you go out into nature and you taste something salty, or you taste something kind of sweet, or you taste something kind of fatty, it is what? It is nutrient-filled, nutrient-rich foods. But the new foods kind of do a little psych out. The Hartwigs called it foods that had no brakes. It basically convinces your body that it is good, and so you should keep consuming it. And so your brain gets tricked that it's good, you should keep consuming it. But your stomach, your digestion system is saying, we are not getting anything good down here. But the brain doesn't hear the signals because of how the food is made, or the brain takes hours. So literally, most people, when they sit down, my horrible is a bag of barbecue potato chips. I can sit there and how can I eat the whole bag? How can I be like an hour later writhing on the floor going, why did I do this? How can this happen? It's because it tasted salty, and so my brain was saying, hey, that's good. It tasted good. It tasted right. It must have lots of nutrients. But eventually the stomach, the gut has a voice, and it finally says, no, it was horrible, and the only way it was going to break is to ram into a tree, aka me writhing on the floor fully in pain. So this was, I was like, no way! And so I'm sort of a conspiracy theorist anyway, so now I'm all like paranoid. I'm looking at the bag. You don't want to shop with me ever again, I think. Basically, don't ever go to a grocery store with Pastor John, I think. So anyway, but that's really not my point. My point up here is not to talk about necessarily nutrition. My point is that the brain can be tricked. That the brain can be tricked from what it perceives as good, but in reality, your gut knows, the physicalness of it knows that wasn't good at all. But your brain can be tricked. That leads me to talking about this guy right here. This guy right here. Everybody knows this guy, right? Caesar, but which one? It's in your text. Caesar Augustus, yeah. I swear somebody was going to say Julius. I was like, oh man, come on, it's right there. It's right there. Yeah, this is Caesar Augustus, who is the nephew of Julius Caesar. Jeff, can you go to the next slide? Here's a little bio of him. I got this on PBS, so I know it's legit because PBS is good stuff. All right, adopted by Caesar, named Julius Caesar, Augustus. He reigned from 62 BC to 14 AD, and then he reigned from 31 BC to 14 AD. Had to fight for his throne. His long rule saw a huge expansion of the Roman Empire and the beginnings of a dynasty that over the next century would transform Rome for better or for worse. So let's talk about Caesar Augustus a little bit, because that's where our text starts, right? In those days, Caesar Augustus issued a decree. All right, who's this Caesar Augustus? Why is he even mentioned in this? Well, a couple things. One, he is the nephew who was adopted by Julius Caesar because Julius Caesar didn't have a son, or his sons were killed, or those sort of things. And he got the reign after Julius Caesar was killed. And he was actually a really, really good Caesar. The only problem with Caesar Augustus is that sometimes he was too good of a ruler. He expanded so quickly. He did all these great things. I want to show you a couple of pictures. Jeff, go to the next slide for me. This is a denarius that was most likely used during the time of Jesus. This is the image of Caesar. If you're ever familiar with that text, give the render to Caesar with Caesar's. Yep, this is probably what Jesus is holding. But what I wanted to show you is the back part of it. The back part of it. And actually, it's in Latin, but a rough pronunciation is Divus Filius. Divus Filius. What does that mean? Jeff, can you go to the next slide for me? Divus Filius means the Son of God. Because after Julius Caesar died, there was a comet that happened. And they looked up at the comet and they said, look, the Son, the God of Julius Caesar is ascending into the heavens. And so, as the adopted son of Julius Caesar, of course, Caesar Augustus understood this, very wise guy, and said, that is true, he is a God, and therefore what? I am the Son of God. Diva Filius. But another word that happened out there as well. So you see this comet, or you have a victory, which actually Caesar Augustus had quite a big victories. Huge victories. We'll get into that in a little bit more. Every time there was a victory, every time there was a special proclamation about what was happening in the empire, sweet, awesome things, front page headlines kind of saying, they would release an euangelion. And euangelion is a gospel or a good news. Both these terms are very common Roman Empire terms. But they're very specific in how they're used. Only the Caesar is the Son of God. And only Caesar, or only the Senate at most, can release an euangelion. Only the top can proclaim a gospel of good news. And it was. He was the Son of God in a lot of ways. Let's look through this. Jeff, this is his empire that he expanded. Look at that. Almost all the way up to Britain. Almost all the way down into Egypt, Ethiopia, Mesopotamia, all the way over to Spain. Huge empire. Huge expansion. Jeff, go to the next slide for me. Not only that, but we're talking about a huge army. This is the symbol of the Roman army, which could not be defeated. Was undefeated for 3 or 4 centuries. You're talking about hundreds of thousands of well-trained military personnel guarding this empire on all their borders. And you just saw how big those borders. They had an equally big army to protect those borders. And they were undefeated. Nobody could defeat these guys. The only people that could defeat the Roman army was the Roman army. And then of course, Rome. Now, sorry for the dark picture. Try to get it as best I can. This actually is in the movie Gladiator, which if you ever want some good representation of how Rome looked at the time, go watch Gladiator. It's a pretty good movie. But this is a scene from the Praetorium, so where Caesar and the Senate would meet, looking out into the Colosseum. Nobody had ever seen buildings like this, guys. This was an empire not only in land, not only in military might, which had happened before, but in architecture. Nobody had ever seen this tall of buildings. Nobody had ever seen this big of cities. It was unheard of in the ancient Near East. And yet Rome did it. So of course, on the level, on the brain level, on the sight level, he's the Son of God. You can't do this kind of stuff without being a son of God. You can't have an army like this without being a son of God. You can't have buildings, you can't have land like this unless you are the Son of God. And look at all the good news there. Peace, prosperity, roads, all sorts of stuff. But, like I said, Caesar could only do so much. This is also from that pbs.org website. Augustus had ended 100 years of civil war and achieved over 40 years of internal peace and prosperity. His vision and power had expanded the Roman Empire to become far more than a collection of countries, and said it was a diverse society and an enormous marketplace in which people across Europe, North Africa, the Middle East could trade and travel under Rome's protection. He had won over the Senate and founded a dynasty. But this would feature as many villains as heroes, and would take Rome on a roller coaster ride into assassination, insanity, and terror. So no matter how good the Son of God was, no matter how awesome the euangelion, the gospel, had been, and no matter how many times it was proclaimed, the Roman Empire in all its vast and gloriousness got thrown into, I love this, a roller coaster ride into assassination, insanity, and terror. Euangelion, good news. Even the great and mighty, and he was great and he was mighty, Diva Filius himself, the Son of God, Caesar Augustus, couldn't hold it all together. And it was. It was it turned into a horrible time. It turned into a time of a lot of suffering. And so, we are here in a Christian church. We call ourselves Christians, call ourselves followers of Christ. What was the answer? Go back to our text. In those days, Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census should be taken on the entire Roman world. This was the first census that took place while Quirinius was governor of Syria. And everyone went to their own town to register. So this is Bethlehem. So kind of a rendering. It's a picture and then they rendered certain things differently. This is Bethlehem. In modern Rome, there was a guesstimation, it's just a guesstimation, we're not quite sure, that there was roughly between 1 and 2 million people in Rome. That's including free people and slaves. In Bethlehem, they guesstimate somewhere around at that time between 300 and 1,000 people. So, I mean, for people who live in Sealy, right next to Houston, you kind of get it. All right, so Bethlehem, maybe Sealy, Texas. 300 to 1,000 people. Wasn't much going on there. A small, quiet suburb, bedroom community of Jerusalem. Jeff, can you next slide for me? This is a rendition, not of the census taken in Judea, but a census taken in another part of the Roman Empire. But you see, I wanted to show it to you. I wanted you to get a feel of the backup that a census was taking. Because it's not like a census that we understand today. You know, people would come up to our door, knock on it, very polite. Can you tell me all your information? No, it was nothing like that. You went to usually one spot. You usually went to one spot, especially in a small town like Bethlehem. They had one queue line. And this guy way over here on the left here, upper left, he would sit here with his abacus, like a real life abacus, and be counting every chicken that you owned, and every goat that you owned, and every cow that you owned, because he taxed not on you, he taxed on what? Your possessions. That was the census part. He didn't care about how many were in you and your family. No care about that. He wanted to know how many acres you owned. He wanted to know how much grain you produced or crops you produced. He wanted to know exactly all these details. And if you didn't have what he wanted to have, that's why they're soldiers. If you don't have the right answer, they're going to give you the right answer. So there's this massive line, if you can think about this, in Bethlehem. Maybe in like Main Street, in Sealy. If you can imagine a massive line, a backup line, trying to get into Citizens Bank or something, that is coming and stretching out back into the park. That is what Bethlehem was probably like. One mass pileup of goats and chickens and cows and farmers and people just waiting to be counted by the Son of God. But it's good news, right? It's all evangelion. It's all good news. Because there's peace, right? There's prosperity, right? It's all good in the empire right now, but it wasn't good at all. It tasted right. It smelled right. Even our brain said, well, maybe the Roman rule, maybe Roman occupation has the right way of going about it. And yet still unfair taxation. Yet still occupation. Yet still horrible disregard for people's freedoms, of people's religion choice. Don't get out of line. We'll put you back in there. That's how the Son of God works. You don't want to leave Galilee? You don't want to take a 2-week trip, Joseph and Mary, to go to your hometown? Who cares? You're going to go there. Evangelion, the good news of the Son of God of Caesar Augustus. In those days, Caesar Augustus issued a decree, a proclamation. Maybe even they thought it was a gospel, a good news, that a census should be taken of the entire Roman world. That's a big world, but it really has to do with Syria. It really has to do with Judea. It's during this time this governor, was he liked? Well, we don't say much about him. And everyone went to their own town to register. I'm telling you guys. I'm telling you, this was understood in a very specific context. Jeff, you can go to the next slide for me. Will the real good news please stand up? There was proclamations of the Son of God already. There was evangelions. There was good news already. But it turned out not to be. It turned out to trick the brain, trick the people, trick the Senate. It tricked almost everybody into believing, well, maybe Rome is the most powerful thing on this earth. Maybe Caesar Augustus is the Son of God. Maybe we have no hope beyond Caesar. Maybe we have no hope beyond Rome. And Luke speaks specifically in those days, in the days of understanding that maybe Rome is our only hope, that maybe Rome is the way to go for peace and prosperity. Maybe if we just trust in Caesar, or opposite, maybe we just rebel with arms. Maybe we just fight and rebel. Maybe we can be free of his tyranny. Maybe that's the good news. In those days, a proclamation went out from Caesar, and the proclamation was always understood as good news. But it wasn't. It was the new food of the Caesars. It was the junk food of Caesar that wanted to strip everybody of any reliance except on him, the Son of God. So Luke had to start asking the question. Luke, when he presented his gospel, he said, we have to get something straight. I am going to use a word. I am going to use a phrase, and it's going to be called euangelion. And you understand this in one way. You understand it as from Caesar. You understand it as a military victory. You understand it as a step toward peace or prosperity in some Roman world or kingdom or empire. And yet, I am not going to use it that way. I am going to talk about something different. This good news comes in weird forms. This good news comes in a baby. This good news comes in this crowded, queued up town. There's not anywhere to sleep. There's not anywhere to eat. It's in those spaces, in the place, the mundane lines, in the mundane towns, in the regular and the ordinary and the poor. That's where the good news is going to be proclaimed. So I ask us, and this is a hard one, guys, and this is where I want to end. This season, as we prepare, as we go into it, and I'm sure all of us have already started experiencing it, walking into our favorite store, walking downtown, walking anywhere you've already experienced, there will be a lot of Christmas junk food offered to us. Now, yes, Christmas junk food, yes, the regular kind, yeah, there'll be a lot of that too. You make your own choices about whether you have the 4th or 5th cookie or not. That's your choice. But there are other things that are out there, guys, and they will come in the nicest packages. They will come in the sweetest ways. And on the surface level, really, guys, they're not that bad. They are what they are. They are what they are. Jeff, can we run through this? It might come in the form of a Christmas tree and beautiful lights and a beautiful fire and it seemed perfect, like out of a picture. Maybe it'll come, Jeff, in the form of Santa Claus. This is off Polar Express. You know, that's good times, right? You know, how many times do you watch Polar Express every Christmas? I'm like 6 or 7 at least for me. You know, Rudolph Red-Nosed Reindeer is like 10. So, you know, maybe it is the food itself. You know, sitting down with family or friends. This is good stuff, right? This is fun, Jeff. Maybe it's watching Charlie Brown Christmas and caroling out in your neighborhood. This is awesome stuff, right, guys? But the point is this. Jeff, can you go to the next slide? The point is this, that it isn't the gospel. Those things are absolutely wonderful. Hear me right. I am not condemning Charlie Brown Christmas Special to hell. I am not doing that. If you watch Charlie Brown Christmas, you're a bad Christian. You know, I'm not saying that. But I'm saying this is what happens during the Christmas season. People get stressed out. People get overwhelmed. What is Christmas all about? We kind of watch Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. I'm like, I should be like Ebenezer Scrooge, and I should have a resurrection kind of moment. And then what do? Well, we have to go sing carols, and we have to go watch Polar Express, and we have to go have a perfect food, and we have to have a great tree. And people are convinced if they do that, then the meaning of Christmas, the feeling of Christmas, will enter back into their life. And that's not the case. That's not the case. I wish it was as easy as turning on a Charlie Brown Christmas Special, guys, and all of a sudden Christmas is woohoo! It's out of our Tangible Kingdom Primer book, and it just hit me so hard. When and where the gospel lost its place in the everyday life of believers is a mystery. But there is no doubt that it is not informing most of our basic life issues, priorities, and decision making. We often end up shrinking the concept of the gospel down to a small set of beliefs or doctrines. At the same time, we neglect to live out the greater story of God that we're all part of. This is the idea for Christmas. This is even the idea of Advent. As we walk into the Christmas season, it's not about experiencing all those wonderful things I just showed you. If you do, great. It's about experiencing the greater story. It's about experiencing the good news that comes in the weirdest, most mundane, most poor moments. It is the moments of Emmanuel. It is the moments where God is with us right in the, when we're standing in the checkout counter at like Macy's and we're like the 12th person back and we're about to rip off people's heads. That's where the gospel becomes real. It's when you're walking past people and they're looking down because they're stressed, and all of a sudden you look up and you start smiling at people or something. It is Emmanuel. It is living in the greater story. Jeff, go to that last slide. It is Isaiah 7, 13 and 14. Then Isaiah said to the people who did not want to test God, the context around here, I don't want to test God. I don't want him to be angry with him. Well, here, you don't need to test him. I'll just give you. Hear now, you house of David. It is not enough you try the patience of humans. Will you try the patience of my God also? Therefore, the Lord himself will give you a sign. The virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and will call him Emmanuel, meaning God with us. This is the good news. In the days of Caesar Augustus, and the days of Barack Obama, in the days of the United States, in the days of Sealy, Texas, in the days of long lines, in the days of credit card debt, in the days of uncertainty about security and safety, in the days that people want to proclaim a different gospel through money, through power, influence, or manipulation. The gospel of a little baby boy born in a manger in a busy town called Bethlehem rises to the surface. Emmanuel, God with us. May God be in the center. May the good news be at the center as you embrace these days. As you go out to the shops, as you go out and watch movies and eat food and decorate the house, may that little boy, Emmanuel, be with you, and may the good news come from him. Amen. We're now going to take a time of prayer.